Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. Today we wanted to talk about, Jordan and I were just talking about things have been pretty wild lately. If you're in the US, things have been a little bit crazy as far as news-wise, volatility, um, and with everything that's been happening politically and all sorts of things that affect the market. And we were talking about this in relation to our trading and specifically challenges we've had the last couple of weeks. If you listen to the last couple of podcasts, you'll notice exactly what we're talking about. But we wanted to tie this back to something that we've briefly mentioned in the past, but we wanted to do a deeper dive into it today, into why trading can take longer to learn than is often preached, and not for the reason, not just to learn it, but the reasons, but maybe some deeper reasons behind why it takes longer. Even if you put all the work in, you work 24 hours a day on the market, how there's kind of a minimum of how long it will take even with that. And we wanted to discuss that because this will kind of give you a more realistic, hopefully a more realistic time frame of when you can expect to be good and take a little bit of the pressure off as it's taking longer than you hope it will. So we wanted to dive into that today and kind of give you some of that, hopefully put you into a better headspace and give you some reasons and confidence going forward to press through the hard times. Jordan, what's up?
Nothing much, man. Just got back from a little mini holiday yesterday. Went to Krabi, which is kind of a an island, a bunch of islands and stuff off about 3 hours away from here. It has some awesome rock climbing, so we went and did some rock climbing at this place called Spirit Mountain, and then took a boat tour along four different islands. Did some snorkeling and stuff. So ton of fun. Yeah, but yeah, didn't get back until like 11 o'clock last night, and then the baby decided it was time to party, so I was up until like 1 o'clock. So I'm exhausted, but it was my kind of my first day. It was my first one single day. I didn't work Friday. It was my first day, actual day of not working during the week for I don't know, like 7 months. So it was due. It was due. So I was it was nice to get away with the family for a bit. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to this subject, it was something you and I have talked about on and off actually the last few weeks as we've seen markets at all-time highs and kind of just talk and jitters about the political climate in America specifically because both you and I trade indices, so essentially we don't trade forex, so we could literally care less what's happening anywhere else. It's only kind of the American news that really follows or affects what we're doing. And the fact is, I think, on this podcast, we've been pretty consistent with saying, yeah, you need to do all this stuff. You need to trade for probably 2 years, in order to get to the point where you know how to trade. And while I still stand by that, it's with a huge caveat. It's like it takes 2 years to learn what your look kind of looks like and how not to just be an idiot and how to follow your rules. But it actually doesn't mean that you're going to be making money after 2 years. And honestly, I'm going to challenge that after 2 years, you're probably still not going to be making money. Or if you are, you're not making much, or you're going to have times where you make money, but then you have those other times where you lose all that money that you've made. So you're still essentially a break even. And that's because if you go back and you kind of look at the historical evidence, and you read kind of some of the just typical long-term investor data, you'll find out that there's kind of a 4 year cycle of the US stock market, which follows the, funny enough, and it makes sense, the presidential election cycle. And so I'm going out there and telling you that it takes about 4 years to be able to learn how to trade and successfully because it takes 4 years for you to be able to see all of the quote unquote looks that you're going to see in the market. And until you've been trading 4 years, you haven't seen looks, you haven't seen markets move in certain ways. And so while the market is always going to be different and it's a constantly evolving thing, it still does tend to roll in these kind of 4 year cycles, with different economic environments. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I want to talk about is kind of those 4 year cycle of the markets.
Yeah, so this kind of gives a cap on, even if you put all your time into it and you're put, if you've only seen half of what the market has to show you. Um, when you can be really good at those, but when the next market that you haven't seen shows up, um, it can it can really hurt you. And we mentioned this briefly last podcast, but you and I, since we've traded the same amount of time and we trade the same things, it's interesting that even though we have slightly different strategies and we trade differently, and we can't trade together because of that, even with that, we still tend to struggle or tend to make money at the same times. When I'm doing well, you're doing well, and when you're where I'm doing badly, you're doing badly, and vice versa. We
Yeah.
tend to struggle and succeed at the same times because of this. That, and it just goes to show this. We've seen the same kinds of markets for the same amount of time, and so when a new market look shows up, we both tend to struggle, which is funny. And it just goes to show this whole point. It doesn't matter how skilled you are, if you've trained your data, we're now used to these LLMs, this AI and the way AI works and these deep, learning models, and how you essentially feed these models a bunch of data so they can interpret new data. Well, that's the way your brain works. And just like with an AI, if you feed it a bunch of data and then feed it something completely out of left field that it's not used to, say you've trained a AI to recognize faces, and then you show it a car, it'll have no idea what the hell it's looking at because it's seeing something it just hasn't seen before. And this is exactly how your brain works. If you train it on how to trade in a certain market condition and then a different market condition shows up, you're going to struggle, period. Doesn't matter how good you are. So you could be amazing at, let's say, using your 4-year cycle analogy. You could be amazing at the first 2 years, the first 3 years of that cycle, and then something else shows up, and maybe that fourth year, and now you're struggling again. So it's a really interesting idea. Can you give any more detail on like the 4 years and how those differ from each other?
Yeah, for sure. And this, of course, I think also depends on the president, the political environment as well. But typically, so the first year, which is like post-election year, so next year is going to be our first year because it'll be post-election. Essentially that year it tends to be like really volatile, and we see lower market returns. This is especially true with like the indices, right, or some of kind of just the stock market, because it's a time when you've got a new administration coming in. They're setting their policies. They are essentially trying to figure out which way that they're going to be going in terms of fiscal responsibility. And so there's a lot of uncertainty. And so, it's just the market's up and down days. Someone says, yeah, the president goes, yeah, we're going to do this, or then we're going to tariff, or we're not, and free market, and all of these things. And so the market can just be up and down and super volatile. And that's followed then by the second year, which is essentially usually actually historically the weakest of all those 4-year cycles. Essentially, probably no one really knows why. It's kind of just theorized that essentially that's due to political changes and midterm elections, and honestly, just second year presidential fiascos in general. Uh, and then that's followed all by the third year. And the third year is historically the strongest performer in the cycle. Because this is usually, honestly, think about it. The presidents are wanting to get reelected. They're implementing some popular economics. They're trying to boost the economy and secure their reelection. And so they're really starting to essentially
Pull the correct levers and knobs
yeah,
to
the
make
the
the
whole economy, make people
the
like them.
economy go.
And
Yeah.
then, of course, welcome to fourth year, folks, which we are in the midst of. And we are getting to experience fourth hand right now because essentially we have no idea who's even going to be the Democratic president elect or Democratic nominee now at this point. And so the fact is, markets are going to be volatile. Um,
Mhm.
and of course, they are going to tend to be positive because, again, there's a lot of incentive from the governmental perspective to make sure that your economy isn't in the tank while you're trying to run for re-election. And so those are kind of the four cycles or the four sections of the cycle.
Hmm. Yeah, and we're now, I mean, talking about volatility, we're in a really, I would I've warned a couple people I've talked to, and probably it's a good idea to make a general a general thing on the podcast is be really careful. I mean, trade really defensively for this next little while. I mean, we're in a really volatile time. Not just in the market, but the market tends to follow the really volatile news, and a lot of crazy stuff has happened. Um, you know, we've had an assassination attempt. We've had the current U.S. president is now no longer running. The like you said, the nominee is now up in question. Things are pretty crazy. And so if there's ever a time to play really defensively and to err on the side of caution, now is the time, right? So be really careful of and this is me speaking to myself because it's really hard to step on the brakes when you've been stepping on the gas and you've been really successful. It's it's hard to make that adjustment quickly before you lose a lot of money. Because when money making is good, you want to step on the gas. When money making is bad, you want to step on the brakes and slow down. And so try to find that before you lose all your money. So yeah, that's a really interesting take, and I really think having a correct idea on how long it takes because of that can give people a good, I don't know, take the pressure off, recognize how long it's going to take, and not freak out when you've been successful, say for let's say you're making some money and then all of a sudden you have start having big losing streaks. Yeah, that could be you. So find out whether that's you. But it also could be, hey, you're in a different spot that you haven't seen before, and maybe you just need to see more of it.